Yeah, got my LaCroix today.
Oh, it's my drink. Been feeling
Uh,
horrible today.
yeah, I got a little bit of head cold too. Like I had to.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know
it
what
was
it
alright. It was like
is.
up and down, but I ain't nothing yet today.
I don't know what it is, man. Maybe they put something in the air. There's corruption in the air. It's probably messing with
Corruption in the
us.
air.
That's pretty much what it is.
It's the
All
bioplant.
right, let's get to it. People will come in as they come in, and they'll watch it on replay when they do. So,
Yeah.
I want to get into the hyper focused behavior of our broadcast that we see here in America. And I went
Mm,
on this little bit of a rampage hyper focused research just why the broadcasting in America is the way they is. So, simply put, after 2013, the Congress unanimously voted. Okay, you ready for this, Avery?
hmm.
Congress unanimously voted that this Smith-Munn Act, now known as like the National Defense and Education Bill, something like that. I think it's some real huge name. I think some like the Modernization Act. You have it of 2012, Modernization Act of 2013. Uh, but what I found out is that that Congress unanimously voted to instate that now broadcasting governors of the broadcast world and the educational world that now can push out that it's okay to push out some form of propaganda to the American people, to which the
That's crazy.
original Smith-Munn Act was to perpetuate propaganda to outside people. It wasn't to its own citizens, it was for the outside, so it would kind of put people on this like rabbit hole thought process of what they thought about America because of what America's disseminating outside the country. But now
Interesting.
politicians, government arms, people can literally put out quote unquote propaganda to its own people. So I went on this whole thought process. Could we really, so knowing that, can we really have faith in our media that gives
Yeah,
us the
well,
news?
obviously not. We already didn't have faith. But what? Yeah, do you know some of the things that highlighted it just literally allowed any media outlet to like can they not get sued now? Is it okay to like use certain tactics?
That's a great question. It's
Yeah, it's
it's
pretty
it's
interesting.
about a narrative. It's about information, right? So it went
Okay.
from putting outside. So the original act, the U.S. Information and Education Exchange Act of 1948, properly referred to as the Smith-Munn Act, specifies the term in which the U.S. government can exchange in public diplomacy.
Mm,
Among the provisions of the 1948 Act was the creation and information service to disseminate abroad information about the United States, its people, and policies. So it was supposed to give out this imagery of what we look like from abroad. Why? Why did they do this?
mm,
Well, because you had World War II, you had all types of things going on, and I guess the American government, out of for the sake of national security, they
really?
wanted outside people to see America a certain way, right? Either strong or a flex, or other
Mhm.
countries are smaller while we're bigger, right? Because it put fear in or be fear mongering to outside influences. It would be a counter propaganda scheme, right? So the Smith Munn Act would be counter. It would be something to counter the outside narrative.
But we're
But
using it now on our own people.
on in 2013, to some extent, we are using that
Oh.
now on our own people. It's almost as if, from what I've interpreted in the
So who voted on
2013,
that?
the entire Congress unanimously, both sides,
No,
bipartisan.
no.
It was unanimous. I promise you. I sent you the links. It was unanimous.
Hey,
Under
yo.
President Barack Obama, this was a huge issue. This was something that, was even talked about like, is this even constitutional? Right? This was the fear that a lot of government officials was having, because they were like, wait a minute. So you're saying it's free game. So now they control how the narrative gets sprung, even within our own network, in our own information
Mm.
source. So
It's
for
almost
example
encouraged now. No consequences.
what is the headlines over every single media outlet right now that's political? What are the headlines?
Russia invades Ukraine.
Bingo. Every single one. We're talking about from liberal to right,
Mhm.
from left to right. It does not matter. Every single media is saying the same headline: Russia invades Ukraine.
Mhm. Russia
How
invades
unique?
Ukraine.
How unique? No one has a different spin. Every single news outlet is reporting it the same way. And they're very hyper
Wow.
focused on that one particular thing, which is a big thing because it's Russia invading Ukraine. However, certain things like, what's going on in Somalia, the airstrikes seems to be slipping the cracks.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Let's get into this
And
intro really quick, Macho.
let me share
We
this
will.
before we do that, before we
Cool,
roll it.
cool. Go ahead.
This is what I'm saying. We just
Mm,
had this on February 22nd, last week, last Tuesday. The US initiated a series of drone strikes in Somalia.
that's crazy.
In Somalia.
While this is all unfolding, right? And what else is happening? And what else there's to the
So
story?
we're
Yeah,
so
like these are
hyper
questions you
focused
gotta
on
ask.
hate Russia because of Ukraine, staying in solidarity with Ukraine. Mind you, look at what's going on in Somalia. Roll it.
Wow.
Freedom of the press shouldn't allow them to lie to us. That's right. Travis is in
Hmm.
the house. Thank you, Travis, for joining the show impromptu last
Appreciate you.
week. We appreciate your input, especially being that you've been in combat. So thank you for joining the show. We
For sure.
appreciated your take. So I really would like to start from that angle, Savory. You know why? Because
Hmm.
it goes into why we're having this show, right? We want to ask the questions because we want to dig
For
deep below
sure.
the surface, right? We've been wrestling this past weekend and last week with the
Hmm.
information that we've been learning. So, let's what exactly are we wrestling with today?
Yeah, yeah, man. I think right now it's like you said, we have a streamlined narrative, right? And it seems too strategic to me, right? The reason it seems too strategic is because it's brilliant, right? Because if you say something about Ukraine, then you are a Putin sympathizer, right? If you say something about NATO, then you're criticizing the other countries. If you try to understand what Putin is doing, again, not justify, but just understand, you are considered to kind of like already be put in a box, right? And this is I think both sides to a certain extent are falling into the accepted narrative, like propaganda just disappeared. Right. Like propaganda is alive and well in America. That's just the reality,
Oh,
right? So for me,
this
I'm like, all right, we got to
situation,
question this.
Savory, this situation made it more clear to me, which is why this past weekend I lost sleep because I'm like, why
Mm,
is every single outlet literally saying the same thing? No one's taking a different spin on this. No one's saying
yeah,
it's either they're saying the same headlines, right? The left is saying this is Putin's fault. The right is saying this is Biden's fault. That's the only difference, Savory. That's it.
yeah. But at the end
That's
of the
it.
day, they're united behind what's happening and criticizing Russia and all. And again, and it's not about criticizing; it's about the lack of questions, right, Macho? That's kind of what we're it's about. It's about a lack of question.
Or real journalism.
Exactly.
And look, we're not looking for a conspiracy. We're not looking for we just want more questions to be answered, right?
Exactly.
Why did Putin do this? Why did he up his game? For example, Savory, when I was looking at some of the things this past weekend, and I just found out
Mhm.
today that the Ukrainian people don't even look at this as something new. In fact, they see this as a continuum of the Russian Ukraine war.
Mm,
They've been at war since 2014. So they see this as a continuum, right? This is not something sparked out of nowhere. They've had this issue with this neighboring country since 2014.
for
But
sure.
here, the
For
way the
sure.
narrative is like Putin's doing this out of nowhere, unprovoked. In some
Mhm.
regards, we'll get into this today. Yes, it is unprovoked.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and
there's
it's
some
yeah.
but let's look at this bigger, more broader. Like there's a bigger story to this.
Yeah, yeah, and the reason, right, before this segment here, as we get into the details, is it's for the simple fact that there's a geopolitical um thing to be learned here, right? Because you have the history, you have things like NATO, you have the presidencies, you have what Putin is saying, you have what Trump and Biden said, you have, so it's like, wait, it can't be that simple, right? That's kind of where my mind goes. I'm like, Putin didn't just get wake up from bed and said, "Oh, Biden's president, let's invade." It's we got to be honest, a little more complicated. Which I'm not even fully
Yeah.
even putting it only on Biden, right? I just think it's more complex than this.
This is a multifaceted issue, and we need to be honest about how we look at this. And that's what we're going to do in this next segment. All right, I want to keep it 100 on a high level today. I want to thank everybody who's joined us. Please share this. Please make sure people know about us because we want to keep it fully authentic here and dive away from the conspiratorial, right? We're not diving in speculation. We're literally just taking the information what we got and digesting that and then making our own assessment. So today in this Keep It 100 segment, you guys are going to hear our perspective on our take as to what we think about this. Now, here's what I want to wrestle with today, Savory, and that is this. I much rather that the American headlines, if they're going to do this
Hmm.
2013, if they're going to spin it, that's fine. Cool. I'll play ball. I don't agree with it. I'll play ball. Why not say the Russian Ukraine war has escalated rather than to say the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Mm,
Headlines say
that's a
the
good
Russian,
question
you
to
know what I'm
ask.
saying? Because it gives me the opportunity to look into it without
So,
a
s-
preconceived idea.
so much of the question now is follow up on what you just said is do they want you to look at it like that, or are they really focused on having the world against the Russia overall, right? Because even if you come to the conclusion that you disagree with Russia, where in many ways we both do in how they're doing it, but that's far from the point we're trying to make. Even if you disagree, why not be critical about Ukraine? Why not be critical about corruption on both sides? And why not kind of
Correct.
learn from this process, right? This is where we're coming from, right? Because to add a layer to that is if you don't have the world united, right, against Russia, right, at least in the West, right, US, UK, and these places, I think it's very important, right, to have a unity that's against and pushing back against what Russia's doing. Because
Well,
now this is where we need to talk about why.
I'd much rather to unify against corruption than to unify against a country.
Exactly,
I
exactly.
would much rather in America, as an American citizen who loves my country, and if we're going to apply things equally, right, we're against corruption here in our own government,
Hmm.
then we should be against corruption outside of our government in foreign policy. And our president should be steadfast against the corruption. So that would mean what? He doesn't take a side.
Yeah,
That would be the
especially
marks of a real leader.
So from your learning, Macho, when you think of Ukraine, right? Why do you think there's a lack of, I guess, scrutiny when it comes to Ukraine
Because
in our Western media?
Ukraine has already shared the posture that they want to join NATO. Okay, this ties to back to that. Because they want to join NATO, they have to fit a certain criteria. Joe Biden said in last year in a segment where he spoke about this that in order for Ukraine to join NATO, they will have to clean out the corruption. So it's fair. I give it up to Joe. Yeah, you go, Jojo. Absolutely. But what does that do now? This throws the indicator to the rest of the world that what? Ukraine is corrupt.
Yeah,
We can't
but
overlook that.
it's almost like he threw. I feel like that's a bone that's thrown out there. That's because he says corruption and set of other things, right? Something like that. I think Joe Biden said. You told me, but it's
Yeah,
almost like
and
there's
to
no
fit a
clarity in
certain
that, right?
criteria.
I I
Apparently,
believe
there's
that's
a
part of.
criteria. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I believe that's part of holding the bone in front of Russia. Like, hey, you know what I'm saying? Like we got you here, though, because remember, Putin's biggest critique is Ukraine, NATO's expansion around Russia, and Ukraine because of um their plant, their bio plants, right? Is them joining NATO, right? NATO, their military forces, and U.S. scientists, and all these kind of people now working on Ukraine, which the biggest threat would be an attack against Russia when they're already surrounded by other NATO countries, right? Why
Right.
against Russia, you ask? Right? Let me answer this to people. Why against Russia? Right? Because Russia does not play ball with things when it comes to NATO, UN, and any kind of like global partnership. They don't trust it. They don't play ball, and they're very wary about the people who are behind these organizations. You see, that's the other conversation we had to have. There's
And
people behind
I
NATO.
think
There's people
I
behind UN. There's people behind
he's
these countries. He's wary of that.
I think he's skeptical because he asked to join NATO and there was some restraint, right? He didn't give the full on
Yes.
details, but he asked to join NATO and they were like, you know what I mean? They probably
Yeah.
didn't say no, they probably didn't say yes. So now
That was when Clinton was in office, right?
his
Yeah.
antennas go up and he's thinking to himself, he's like, why wouldn't you want me to join this?
Mm-hmm.
So you only get to so what are you doing? So what's let me look behind the curtain here. What's your agenda here? Because if you're building this peace treaty across the world, I'm
Mm-hmm.
down. I'm here. I'm free game. I want to play ball. But then you say no, but then you're building this whole thing around my country. What does that tell me?
Do,
What does that tell me?
Macho,
What
do
does
you
that
think
tell you, right?
you think Putin wants peace?
Um, outside of Russia?
Yeah, outside of Russia, with in regards to what's going on
Uh,
in Russia, yeah, it's a whole
that's
different.
why I said what I said, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
inside of that's his realm, right? That's his chaos, right? Outside, I think he wants some kind of business relationship. I think
Mm,
he wants a fair,
okay.
strong business tie because he knows at the end of the day, money talks, bullshit walks.
I like how you put that. I like how you put that, and I agree with you. I think he definitely wants a kind of agreement, right? Because this is my take on Trump and um and Putin, right? Some of the assessments are from everything I'm learning that wow, okay, the media was feeding stories about their partnership and then collusion. None of that was grounded in evidence. That's just the facts, right? Whether you're here and you believe that or not, just I encourage you go look into that. I'm talking about tangible, grounded evidence. But what is clear is the closest thing to the mentality that Trump has for America is Putin towards Russia, right? So he's big on Russia first at whatever cost, right?
Right.
And I think they saw eye to eye. They both had criticism of NATO, right? They both had criticism of the UN. right? They both didn't want a global kind of agenda being pushed. They wanted their country to prosper through good trade deals. He wanted his country. So this is where I think they saw eye to eye, where the media didn't discuss that reason. The media just discussed, oh, collusion, phone call, and this and
Oh, they're
that.
buddy buddy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to Macho show you this really quick. It's only a minute and a half, but this is what he said today.
Let's see.
Обсудим ход проведения специальной военной операции. И несут прямую ответственность за геноцид,
All right, right here.
а с националистическими формированиями, которые, как известно, и несут
Criticizing the
прямую
Ukrainian
ответственность
government.
за
Check this out.
геноцид на Донбассе и кровь мирных граждан народных республик. Кроме того,
This is today, by the
националистические
way.
элементы, внедренные в состав
The nationalist elements that infiltrated regular Ukrainian armed forces units. Check this out.
And hold on, let's pause that right quick.
Yep.
Because this is also the angle that he also stated about neo-Nazis that are running their armed forces in Ukraine. So I
This is where he's
looked
going. Yep.
and I checked several sources for the last 8 years. They have been warning like this is not forget Putin.
hmm
Ukrainians have been very weary of neo-Nazis growing in like these fractions
Yo, you said
in
it,
Ukraine.
Macho. Ukrainians, right? This is what people are not realizing. The voice of the Ukrainian people is not the voice of what the Western media is telling us. It's not that simple, right? So this is
Yeah.
why it gets complicated. That's a good point. Check this out.
не только подстрекают их к оказанию вооруженного сопротивления, но по сути играют и роль заградотрядов.
So right here, I'm gonna play. It's just a few more seconds. I won't play the whole thing, but here he's gonna talk about how he's not fighting against Ukrainian forces any longer. He said, as expected, I'm fighting against other armies, all right, covered in Ukrainian forces that are funded by NATO, US, X, Y, and Z.
Более того, по
According
имеющейся
to available
информации,
information, this is
и это
confirmed by
подтверждается
objectives that we
результатами
are seeing
объективного
this.
контроля, мы видим это. Бендеровцы и
Banderists,
неонацисты
neo-Nazis are putting up heavy
выставляют
weapons,
тяжелое
including
вооружение,
multiple
в том
rocket
числе
launchers,
системы залпового огня, прямо в центральных
right
районах
in the
крупных
central
городов,
district of large cities, including Kyiv and Kharkov.
включая Киев и Харьков. Они планируют
They
вызвать
plan to
ответный огонь
force
российских
return fire. This is where I want to end it. They plan to force return fire by Russian strike system against residential quarters. He's telling you their plans right now, right? So he's telling you their plans. And look,
ударных
it,
комплексов
it
по
hasn't
жилым
it,
кварталам.
it hasn't happened yet, but if this happens in the next few days, there's something to be said about this, right? If they start saying about this. So check this out, right? And then the next one.
По сути, они действуют
In effect, they are acting
так
the
же,
same
как
way
и
that
террористы
terrorists
во
act
всем
all
мире.
over the world.
Прикрываются людьми в
Using people
надежде
as shields
затем
in hope of
обвинить Россию
accusing
в
Russia
жертвах среди
of
мирного
civilian
населения.
casualties. This is today.
Достоверно
It's
известно,
known for a
что
fact
все
that
это
all that is being done of the recommendations of foreign consultants, primarily
происходит
American
по
advisors.
рекомендации иностранных
So he
консультантов.
got
And
his sources. He's
let's
saying
let's
this.
let's be
Американских.
clear. Let's be clear, Mr. Putin. This could have been avoided if you didn't go in, right? If you didn't take
Sure.
the bait and because okay, let's be clear, guys. This is what I've also realized is the war that Russia's been having on the border of Ukraine, because it's been happening since 2014, has been with those forces that he's talking about.
Mhm.
However, here's where it took a spin. He took the bait by entering in the lines, by
Yeah,
taking
but
it a step further. And that's why now everyone around the world, around the region is like, whoa, 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 Putin, stay here. Don't
yeah,
push the line.
but the thing is, behind the scenes, before Putin entered, NATO was entering. They were working on the labs. They were putting soldiers. So this is his thing. He was like, "Y'all working behind the scenes.
Oh,
They're not saying it." So it's like, "Y'all left me no choice because y'all doing this." Last sentence
Американских
here:
советников.
American advisors.
Еще раз
Once
обращаюсь
again, I
к
am appealing to the
военнослужащим
military armed
вооруженных сил
forces of
Украины.
Ukraine. Once again,
Не позволяйте
do not allow
неонацистам и
neo-Nazis
бендеровцам
to use your
использовать
children, wives, elders as living shields. Right? So he's actually. It sounds like a man who wants to negotiate. That's all I'm bringing out here, right? It sounds like a man who. Am I right here? I don't know, but it sounds
which
like a man.
explains why he even asked to sit down with President Zelensky. The man asked to sit
Yeah.
down with President Zelensky to do what, Savory? What did we find out today?
And that's for the ceasefire. Yeah. But again, they're
But
gonna
his
they
fight is not with Zelensky.
yeah.
His fight is with those masquerading armed forces. They're masquerading as they want this conflict. Why? Because again, they want Ukraine. NATO wants Ukraine.
Mm-hmm,
And they're
mm-hmm.
going to do everything in their power to stage this event to have Ukraine. What did Zelensky say? Hey, NATO forces, will you help us? America, will you help us? He's throwing the lifelines out. He's letting people know, I'm with you. I want this to I want it to happen. NATO says, we can't. You're not really NATO. You're not. I'm
Crazy.
sorry. This is a
But
game and I don't like it because it's costing people's lives. So
yeah.
this is where I get frustrated, right? If we look at the credibility of Ukraine, I'm just going to have this here for reference, guys.
Mm-hmm.
10 facts about corruption in Ukraine. Where if you look at videos online, corruption in Ukraine, just look it up. You will see it's so normalized, Savory, that the people in Ukraine don't even care. They just talk about it openly. I bribe police officers, I bribe doctors, I bribe political officials, I bribe the university. I do all these kinds of things to get ahead because that's how it is in this country.
Yeah, it's a functioning corrupted country.
And I want to highlight this. Let's read this. One of the most important things that is highly corrupt about this country is the banking system. Another major contribution to the corruption in Ukraine lies within its banking sector. The severity of corruption within Ukraine banks became especially apparent during the 2014 banking crisis. Most banks involved themselves in the money laundering Ponzi schemes. Let me say that again. Most banks involve themselves in the money laundering Ponzi schemes. The
Mm.
banking system were so corrupt that out of 182 of the nation's banks, 98 of them have been or are in the process of being completely liquidated. Strict anti money laundering laws and tighter controls over cash flow have helped alleviate some of this corruption. In addition, the banks that have survived the crisis are now liable for any losses their clients suffered due to the fraudulent banking practices. So, along with their banking, Savory, the next one after that is government accountability. They
Mm-hmm.
have
And then
none.
and then
They
if you go
have
to number
none.
7, you have justice system. All right, you have number 9, you have number 10, law enforcement. You see, so you keep going
With a
down this list.
credibility like this, hold on, with a credibility like this, I'm for the people. I will stand in solidarity of the people that will die in this. But I will not stand in solidarity with the Ukraine government as corrupt as this, as a credibility as corrupt as this. I'm sorry. I will not
Yeah,
stand
yeah,
with
for
this
sure.
government.
Because you said it, Macho. The people lose, right? So while we're busy
We
fighting
always freaking
about
lose.
about the country and what the leadership is doing and criticizing Putin, which there's a place for that, we just can't do it and forget about the other side of the coin where corruption is going on. What
And
what
that's
what
an
if two countries are
excellent point.
fighting?
That's an excellent point that you
Yeah.
just made, and I don't want nobody to lose. The people lose. Anytime that our American government lies to us through the media, lies through their freaking teeth, we lose when we're not informed. Why? Because when we're misinformed, we vote a certain way. We vote a
Hmm.
certain candidate because we're being lied to. We're being fed disinformation a specific way. We have to put on our critical thinking hats. We have to ask the hard questions and we have to be persistent, not aggressive, persistent. We have to stay focused, not hyper focused, but focus. Have an honest, critical look at these things and just look at the whole thing. We know Russia's corrupt, it's a
Yeah,
dictatorship.
yeah, for sure, no doubt about it. But the thing is, here we have to have an honest conversation that if every part of Ukraine's government system is corrupt, if every part is compromised, if every part is bought, if all politicians worldwide are involved, if they're doing money laundering, if they're not held accountable for anything, what do you gain by backing them without talking about it? Yeah, go ahead. You want to back Ukraine? Go ahead, back Ukraine. But can you also be honest of what the country stands for? The corrupt, because the corruption there, and I feel this is understating it. right? I feel this is actually understating their corruption. The reason I feel it's understated personally is because um, there's no kind of measuring stick to this, right? You can't go to Ukraine and really see if it's gotten better. That's how badly it's compromised. People think because you know the media's out, this country's in, they're using partnerships, so it's a complex thing. And again,
And
do we win if Ukraine's corruption continues to go up, right? But then Russia gets pushed back. What does the world gain off that if Ukraine's corruption is worldwide?
And this is why former President Donald Trump said in CPAC just this past weekend. If you haven't watched it yet, it was a doozy, and he simply said it like this: "The world is safer when America is in control. The
Hmm.
world is safer when America has a strong leader." Do we have a strong leader in the White House?
No,
We
you don't.
don't. We don't. Over the weekend, where did Joe Biden stay? In West Virginia in his home. He just trotted in this morning off the U.S. Air Force One. I mean, come on, this is egregious. You have a serious situation erupting in Europe, and you're literally going home. You should be round the clock. You should be round the clock at the White House. That's what the White House is there for, brother.
No, you can't do that, man.
I'm talking about hardcore getting to the bottom of this. Hey, you know what, Putin, Zelensky, let's get together. Let's figure this out. Let's sit down. Let's have a Camp
We're not about that
David.
life.
Let's have a Camp David. Let's settle the score right now. Too many people are going to die over this. Too many people are going to die over this. The citizens always lose. And it's about time we start to speak up. We have to speak up.
Yeah, and this is part of it. What you're describing, just to bring it home with what some people are saying here. Big Jake, thanks for joining us. But while America has a weak leadership, he took his shot. And then you got Travis
Yeah,
here. There's a reason the president is called the leader of the free world because it
that's
has
right.
consequences, right? America's actions, America's leadership and decision making has consequences at a higher level, even if they're not directly involved. That's how powerful America is. Their word has power. Their politicians have power. Their ministers have power. Their word in itself, even if they're not fully involved, has power.
Yeah, and you have to stand up. Come on, Jojo. You have 2 more years left. Stand up. And one thing I want to highlight before we move to this last segment is former President Donald Trump said, I wanted Joe Biden to do well. He said that in his speech. I wanted him to, he said, forget about politics. I want him to do well because I want America to do well. That's him applying his logic across the board. And while this is whole thing going on, we have this, folks. We have right now the White House has asked Congress for $6.4 billion to be sent to Ukraine in the crisis. With the credibility of Ukraine, with what we just talked about, we only just picked up a few of those things. There are 10 things. There are probably even 20, maybe 50 things that is corrupt about that government. With no government oversight, you want to send $6.4 billion to Ukraine?
Yo, unacceptable, Macho. And I'm gonna tell you why it's unacceptable. Because within that $6.4 billion, a whole bunch of things that we probably don't know about. I bet we don't know where all that money's going. I bet we don't know if the people are getting that. That's why I get frustrated. I don't mind sending money to the people who need help in Ukraine. I don't mind being that country who wants to help. But my distrust is at an all time high. And I think many people in America, their distrust is high. So when I hear 6.4 to Ukraine, who's getting that money?
Get
Break
out of here
down the
with
ideas
that.
for me. No, you say,
And
yeah, I'm not
because,
with
and
it.
here's my fear with how united the media has won in a sense that this administration has won this battle right now. The entire media is united.
Mhm.
There might be a bipartisanship where now all of a sudden, hey, let's give this 6 point. We're feeling generous now. Let's just give this money away. But it hurts us again.
It
Once
does.
again, we always lose. All right, guys, we'll see you on Wednesday.